After the extremely long and brutal war that spread all over the galaxy known as the Frontier War between the IMC and the Frontier Militia, there would be a period of somewhat peace throughout, as every faction tried desperately to rebuild what they had lost and grow their dwindling economies once again. During this time, one man known as Cuban Blisk, an ex-member of the fierce mercenary force working with the IMC, the Apex Predators, decided to form his own new competition along with the group known as the Mercenary Syndicate to try and see who the best warriors were out there and maybe try and reassemble the Apex Predators once again. These tournaments would go on throughout the collective planets of the Outlands, as many different champions would attempt to prove to one another why they were the best of the best, utilizing teamwork, skill and ability, and at times luck. These champions would all come from different backgrounds, with some linked to the past events of the Frontier War, some working as peacemakers in their worlds, and some with extremely dark pasts that used the grounds as simply a form of their own entertainment. One of these champions would be a very dark, dangerous individual with an extremely horrifying past, and would use this tournament as a chance to fuel his love of killing and bloodshed. Once one of the most successful assassins in all of the Outlands, a change in his physical appearance and mental state would lead him to becoming one of the most terrifying things to come into contact with. This champion would be known as Revenant and would be seen as the symbol of death and destruction to many within the tournament and outside of it. But who is Revenant? What is his past? Why does he compete in the Apex games? And what else is he known for out within this universe and the others? Well, in today's video, we are going to look at the known lore of Revenant as of today's date and why he is known as one of the most dangerous characters in all of the Outlands. This is the story of Revenant from Apex Legends. Before Revenant became the steel-framed killing machine that he is known for today, he was known as Caleb Cross and was born in 2356, somewhere out there within the Outlands. Cross, however, was said to have a horrific upbringing where his dad would despise him and most likely abused him as a child. After leaving his father, Cross sought out to become an assassin for the establishment known as the Mercenary Syndicate. It became quite clear to many within the organization that Cross was one of the best killers out there and quickly made a name for himself as the best assassin within their organization. Cross would be said to question nothing at all, would take any contract given to him, and it would always end with the target being eliminated, most times with ease. By the year of 2400, one man known as Bob Woods would go on to witness an event where members of the Syndicate would be a part of an extortion scheme behind the rest of the Syndicate members' backs. Woods immediately knew that these were rogue Syndicate members who were trying to tear down the organization, and with this knowledge told his wife about what had happened, with her telling him to take it to the other members of the Syndicate to make sure further action could be taken to shut this down and make sure none of their information could get out. This, however, was in fact set up by the Syndicate themselves, and now they had to make sure Woods could not expose their actions, immediately placing the target on his back as someone Cross could take out. As Woods ventured back to his home that evening, Cross had beaten him to it, and as he entered the door would go to find his wife's dismembered face lying within the house's entrance. Cross was there as well, waiting patiently for him. Woods desperately escaped and tried to get his children out of school and off the planet, moving them to Gaia to get them to safety. Believing this worked and they were free from the Syndicate and more crucially Cross, Woods would be wrong, as one day he would wake to find that his children had been murdered by the deadly assassin. Cross, however, was arrested for this action by the Gaia Global Task Force, but it didn't take long for the Syndicate to free Cross from prison again so they could use him for their assistance once again. But leaving Woods alive would be a mistake, as he was desperate to get his revenge for his murdered wife and children. Here he would go on to poison Cross's liquor and take him to a sewage facility, and when there would drown him. Hearing of Cross's death, the Syndicate went on to kill Woods immediately for this act, and after doing that went on to gather Cross's body from the water and went on to deliver it to the nearest Hammond Robotics facility to try and somehow bring him or his skills back for their organization. These events were all told by the friendly robot called Pathfinder. However, this wasn't proven to be 100% accurate, as it was only from his memory and could have been exaggerated at times. But with Cross now just a lifeless corpse, Hammond Robotics Robotics started experimenting on him, trying desperately to bring back his consciousness and place it within a robotic body so they could continue using him for the Syndicate's work. This took some time as the initial experiments were extremely unsuccessful, with some effects being said to range from data corruption to hysteria of the subjects. After a while, Hammond Robotics tried to make it so Cross's remnants of his brain were separated from the robotic body that they were testing, which would somehow allow for a remote access which initially would work. But once again, the scientists suffered the problem of data degradation when transferring it from body to body, which would not be good in the long run. This needed to be solved, however, as it was their only real option. 20 years passed as they continued to experiment with Cross's consciousness, and finally the first simulacrum was made. In the year 2420, Revenant was booted up with the killing skills of Cross. Due to his new body as well as his knowledge of being an assassin, Revenant was the ultimate perfect assassin who would be able to take out anyone he was ordered to in any way possible. Revenant fulfilled all of the wishes of the Syndicate as he went around wiping out his targets with ease. This continued for around 200 years with just an endless killing spree, allowing for the Syndicate's rise throughout all of the worlds within the Outlands. This also helped the rise of a supposed cult who honored Revenant in the year of 2560, as they saw him as a god who was to release his wrath onto those who had done wrong. During these 2 centuries, however, Revenant would be killed, but thanks to his robotic body that could be brought back over and over again with the same consciousness, he could never die and could just come back to kill them again and again. This all came to a head in the year 2708 when Revenant was sent to kill Marcus Andrade, a petty thief who had become an extremely wealthy individual with a grand organization. Within this year, Marcus would go on to steal an extremely valuable object from a wealthy client. Knowing that Marcus was the one who stole it, the client would put a huge bounty on his head, and because of that, Revenant was on his way. During this time, however, and the many years before, Revenant still believed he was just a regular human assassin. Whilst he had the skills of twisting his body and creating blades out of his arms, this was all because of the programming which would essentially tell him what was normal and what didn't need questioning. Heading to Marcus's new restaurant, Tenmei, in the grand city of Olympus, Revenant would scale the building, bursting in and killing the guards surrounding Marcus's family. In this large battle, Marcus as well as his wife were both brutally killed, fulfilling Revenant's contract. Their daughter Loba, however, witnessed all of this and was able to survive, but would see the creature that killed her parents and would remember his face for years to come. With the job successfully done, Revenant went to leave Tenmei with a shard of glass still sitting in the top of his collarbone. Walking past a mirror, he would notice this as well as something else equally horrifying. He had no tongue in his reflection. The glass had damaged his ego retention system, which would be in place to stop him from seeing his true robotic form. As he pulled out the glass, Revenant's true simulacrum form was revealed. He wasn't human at all. He was made of metal, and suddenly all of the memories of past events and all of his deaths flooded back to him, the result of the data corruption from each transfer, something the scientists struggled with all the way back in 2400. The one thing he noticed on his new body was one logo, the logo of Hammond Robotics, and now he knew it was them who had done this to him, and he needed to get his revenge on them for making him this horrifying creation. For the next following years, Revenant would go on to chase down those within both the mercenary syndicate and Hammond Robotics, with his first attack on a man named Lowell, who was a member of the syndicate who would go on to tell him the mechanics of his killings over the years. The next attack was on the Hammond Robotics worker, who would go on to explain how he kept coming back to life after being killed through his rebirths, as well as his memory wipes. In this interrogation, the scientist would go on to explain that the Revenant was first set up over 288 years ago, and he had been doing this cycle for that same amount of time, constantly being brought back to kill for the syndicate. With this fact being told to Revenant, he quickly realized that his goal of seeking revenge on the people who made him who he is now could not be possible. Instead, he would form a new goal. That goal was to seek his revenge, not on Hammond Robotics, not on the syndicate, but all of mankind, who he would label as simply skin suits. Out within the Outlands on their main TV programming, an interview was being held with a new legend who was joining the brand new tournament known as the Apex Games, which was financed mainly by the Syndicate. James the Forge McCormick was a real poster boy for the tournament, and going into his interview was a real crowd pleaser, being majorly sponsored by Hammond Robotics themselves. As the interview ran at 10:02 AM, the lights would flicker, and behind him, Revenant would appear, and live on television would brutally murder him, sending out a message to not only Hammond Robotics, but the rest of the Outlands, that he was out to get them. After this, Revenant didn't stop at trying to attack and get information from all of the Hammond Robotics installations, including one facility outside of World's Edge on Talos. This caused panic amongst the Hammond employees, which would trigger the Syndicate to take action. With this information that Revenant was on the loose, taking out anyone in his way, they would try everything to manipulate his programming, as well as other loopholes to induct Revenant into the Apex Games, to allow him to continue his killing frenzy, but in a controlled manner, making it entertaining for the games, but also allowing the Syndicate, Hammond Robotics, and population of the Outlands to be relatively safe from his endless bloodlust. But with the announcement that Revenant had joined the Apex Games, Loba had heard about this and remembered that it was he who had brutally murdered her parents back when she was a child. With this, Loba tried desperately to get into the games herself to get her own revenge on this killing machine. As she went on to infiltrate a hidden facility below Skulltown on King's Canyon, Loba would go on to discover that it was filled with copies of Revenant's body. As well as this, she would also go on to discover the main source code, Revenant's consciousness, in the middle of the facility. Loba would immediately try and shoot it, knowing taking out this would remove Revenant from the world completely and would fulfill her revenge. But as she shot at it, the facility would activate their defenses and transport the source code to another facility, as well as activating specters who would try and kill Loba. Loba was able to fight her way out of the facility in the end, as well as destroying it, causing the whole of Skulltown to collapse into the Duchess River. As she climbs out of the debris, she would come face to face with all of the other legends of the games, as well as Revenant himself. Finally, an opportunity to take him on and get her revenge. Without his source code easily accessible, Revenant once again could just not die and would constantly come back to fight on and on within the Apex Games, causing Loba to look for more plans to get her revenge. With this, Loba enlisted the help of the other legends to travel into an alternate dimension called the Shadowfall Dimension to retrieve pieces of an artifact. But within this dimension would be the Shadow Revenant, an alternate version of himself who would not only be involved in the Apex Games, but would also run it, after he was able to get his revenge on the Syndicate and Hammond Robotics. Caustic, however, joined the team, but as a mole, feeding back information to Revenant about what the team were up to. As the team ventured through this dimension, the main Revenant would show up to intimidate the group, as well as threaten them. During their task, Watson would be injured within the Shadowfall realm, and as they get back, Revenant would intimidate the injured legend, also stating that there is a traitor amongst their group, to try and make them all suspicious of one another. He would also go on to state he wants nothing to do with the Shadow Revenant, as he can't think of anything more pathetic than being king of the skin bags. Revenant would then go on to play tricks with the group even more, hacking Crypto's drone in an attempt to make him look like he was the mole, and further expand their suspicions of the group. Eventually, the legends would go on to discover all of the artifact pieces, and as they do, Revenant speaks to Loba, stating his intention to also find the source code and take it out so he could finally die. Here he pledges to form an alliance with Loba so they can both get their wish. He can finally be put to rest after almost 300 years, and she could get her revenge once and for all. Whilst this plan was great for both parties, Loba was shocked to hear that this was what Revenant ultimately wanted in the long run. In the year of 2733, Revenant was given the opportunity to finally come to his end, as he was given a contract by Boss Willis to capture a stolen communications unit from Crypto in exchange for a deactivation of his source code. Revenant, as usual, successfully captured Crypto and brought him to Willis, but soon it became clear that Revenant was not going to get his wish, as a fight broke out on the vessel and crashed into a hospital. As Revenant emerged from under the rubble, he would go on to impale Willis, reminding him that he promised him death. Yet again, Revenant was to continue to live on. Eventually, Loba met with Revenant, stating to him she finally located his source code, but she was not going to kill him, ending his pain, as she wanted him to suffer as much as she did back when he took the lives of both of her parents. Revenant, mad with rage, broke into a fight with her, but Loba was victorious. But Revenant would remember this action and stated that when Loba finds something or someone she loves with all her heart, he will destroy it once and for all. To this day, Revenant continues to work within the Apex games, fulfilling his bloodlust and trying desperately to try and find his source code so he can finally die and be rid of this pain of being immortal. In his travels, he would go on to meet other legends of the games, as well as another simulacrum known as Ash. With Ash being a vision of what Hammond had done to him and others, Revenant tries to kill Ash, claiming it was an act of merciful euthanasia, stating her life must be hell like his is. But like many other things over the years, Revenant was to fail as Ash fully awakened to her original personality. Revenant still continues to strike deals with other legends, desperate to end his suffering by locating his source code. Now fully aware of his complete past thanks to the robot known as Pathfinder, the idea of continuing to live seems to get worse year in, year out for him. Endless betrayals from other legends would make Revenant even madder throughout his time in the games, and his bloodlust would also get larger each time. Will there be a day where Revenant ever finds peace and be free from his robotic shell and the Syndicate's control, or is this his fate forever? Only time can really tell. But for now, this has been the story of Apex's deadly assassin known as Revenant. And that is the story of Revenant so far anyway. There are some other smaller stories involving Revenant, but I didn't feel like they really painted a real picture on his overall story. There were more times where he was in someone else's event and it didn't really add anything to his overall story. But regardless, I hope you enjoyed this dive into the Apex lore. This channel was catapulted by my Titanfall videos, so I thought it was finally time to venture back to that universe to explore some of these legends, because you know what, Apex is still good fun 3 years later, so why not explore the developed lore it's got now. If you did enjoy this video, why not give it a like, check out my other lore videos, leave a nice comment and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, if you really love this video and channel, why not support me on Patreon or as a YouTube channel member to get early access to every new video, as well as some other stuff to be a part of the community. And speaking of which, I'd like to thank my patrons real quick. Big thanks to our small fish guys, our big fishes, Christopher, AVP Man, Last Persona User, and Arto Krem, our shark, Wow Such Gaming, our huge megalodons, Sinus Jacob Garcia, and our absolutely legendary starfish, Shadow SGT. Also, big shout out to our YouTube channel member, our wise one, Jambu. All your support means the world to me and means I can make these videos for you guys, so thank you all so much. But that is all for now. Many thanks once again for watching, and I shall see you all in the next one. Cheers.